They built a luxury pool on the hillside, and a week later, my trees started dying. At first, I thought it was drought stress, maybe some weird soil issue, but then I saw the water. Clear, shimmering, and wrong. And the worst part? I had already warned them this would happen. I've been working this land most of my life. My name's Daniel Mercer, and my family runs a 14-acre organic apple orchard just outside a small mountain town in Northern California. My parents bought the place back in the late 80s when nobody really cared about organic anything. Back when people thought organic was just a fancy way to say overpriced. But my mom believed in it. She used to say, healthy soil grows honest food. And my dad, well, he just believed in her. So they built this place from scratch, slowly, carefully, learning everything the hard way. By the time they passed it down to me, the orchard wasn't just a business. It was kind of a living memory. Every row of trees had a story. Some of them were planted the year I was born. Others, I planted myself after college when I decided I wasn't cut out for an office job and came back home with dirt still under my fingernails and a chip on my shoulder. Getting certified organic took us 3 full years. 3 years of inspections, paperwork, soil testing, constant monitoring. And here's the thing most people don't understand. You don't just lose organic certification. You violate it. One contamination event, that's all it takes. And suddenly you're not an organic farm anymore. You're just another orchard trying to claw your way back. So when the property uphill from us sold, I paid attention, but I didn't worry. Not at first. The old place had been empty for years, just this rundown cabin sitting on a slope above our lower orchard. Whoever bought it would probably fix it up, maybe build something nicer, enjoy the view. That's what I thought. Then the trucks started showing up. At first it was just surveyors, then excavators, then this steady stream of construction vehicles that didn't really stop for months. They cleared half the hillside, poured a foundation that looked more like something you'd see in a resort than a home, and before long, the rumors started floating around town. Some tech guy bought it. My neighbor Linda told me one morning at the farmer's market, handing me back a box of Honey Crisps. Silicon Valley type. Made a fortune in crypto or AI or something I don't understand. I just nodded. Didn't think much of it. Until I saw the plans. One afternoon, I stopped by the county office to check on a routine permit for a storage shed we were adding, and I happened to glance at the open file on the counter. The address caught my eye, the hillside property. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. And there it was. An architectural drawing of a massive modern home. Glass walls, steel framing, terraces, and right there, extending out like the edge of a knife, an infinity pool. It faced downhill, facing my orchard. I leaned in closer, tracing the lines with my finger, and that's when I saw the drainage system. A clean, simple arrow, pointing exactly where gravity always wins. Straight into my land. I remember standing there for a long time, just staring at it, feeling this slow, heavy kind of dread settle in my chest. Because I knew what that meant. Chlorinated water, runoff, soil contamination, microbial death. Not immediately, not all at once, but enough. Enough to ruin everything we'd built. I asked the clerk if I could get a copy. She hesitated, then shrugged, printed it out. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with those plans spread out in front of me, running scenarios in my head. Maybe they'd use a saltwater system. Maybe the drainage wouldn't be active unless there was overflow. Maybe I was overthinking it. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. So I decided to talk to him. I met him in late spring, right when the trees were starting to flower. His name was Victor Hale, mid-40s, clean-cut, the kind of guy who looks like he's always just stepped out of a business magazine. He greeted me politely enough, standing there in front of this half-finished steel frame of a house, wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than my truck. "Daniel, right?" he said, extending a hand. "Yeah, I run the orchard just below your property." He nodded, like he already knew that, but didn't really care. I kept it simple. Told him about the drainage. Explained what chlorine does to organic soil. How even small amounts could jeopardize our certification. I wasn't accusing him of anything. I was just asking him to reconsider. Reroute it. Add a filtration system. Anything. He listened. Or at least he looked like he was listening. Then he glanced over at his architect, a tall guy named Marcus, holding a tablet, and gave this little half-smile. "Would that be expensive to change?" Victor asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Very." Victor looked back at me, that same polite expression still on his face, but now it felt thinner. Well, he said, the system meets all county regulations. We're not doing anything illegal. I felt my jaw tighten. I'm not saying it's illegal. I'm saying it could destroy my farm. He gave a small shrug. I'm sure there are exceptions, right? For situations like this? I shook my head. There aren't. There was a pause. Wind moving through the scaffolding. Somewhere in the distance, a truck backing up. Victor slipped his sunglasses back on. I appreciate you coming by, he said. But we're already pretty deep into construction. And just like that, the conversation was over. I walked back down that hill with this sinking feeling I couldn't shake. Not anger. Not yet. Just this quiet realization that I had just been dismissed. Not because I was wrong, but because fixing the problem wasn't worth it to him. And for the first time since taking over the orchard, I felt like I might lose it. I tried to convince myself it wouldn't be as bad as I thought, that maybe I was overreacting, maybe the drainage wouldn't run often, maybe there'd be enough dilution by the time it reached my soil. But farming has a way of teaching you not to lie to yourself for long. The land always tells the truth, and by midsummer, it started whispering that something was off. Construction wrapped up faster than I expected. By August, that house was finished, and I'll admit, it was impressive. All glass and angles, perched on the hillside like it didn't belong to gravity. And that pool, stretching out into the air, reflecting the sky like a mirror. From a distance, it looked like something out of a magazine. Up close, it felt like a threat. The first time I noticed the water, it wasn't dramatic. Just a patch of soil near the lower rows that looked darker than usual, damp when it shouldn't have been. We hadn't had rain in weeks. Irrigation was on schedule. Nothing explained it. I crouched down, pressed my hand into the dirt. Cool. Too cool. That's when the smell hit me. Faint, almost clean but wrong. Like a public swimming pool on a hot day. I remember just sitting there for a second, staring at my hand like I didn't want to accept what I already knew. The next morning, I took samples. I've done enough soil and water testing over the years to not panic right away. You collect, you label, you verify. No assumptions. But my gut was already ahead of me, racing toward a conclusion I didn't want confirmed. When the results came back, 3.1 parts per million chlorine. I read it 3 times, hoping I'd misunderstood the units. I hadn't. That level doesn't just affect soil, it disrupts it. Kills off beneficial microbes, throws off nutrient cycles, slowly turns living ground into something sterile. Not overnight, but fast enough that you notice. And I did. Within days, the leaves on the lower trees started yellowing. Not the soft seasonal fade, but this sickly, uneven discoloration. The fruit on those trees, smaller, duller. Some of it dropped early. I started documenting everything. Photos, videos, dates, GPS coordinates, water samples every few days. I even bought a couple of trail cameras and mounted them along the property line where the slope funneled runoff. If this turned into a fight, and I was starting to realize it would, I needed proof. Not opinions. Proof. Still, I went back up there. I told myself maybe he didn't know. Maybe this wasn't intentional. Maybe if I showed him the data, the numbers, the actual damage, he'd understand. Victor answered the door this time, not in work clothes, but something casual, like he was getting ready to head out somewhere nicer than anything I'd ever been invited to. I held up the test results. It's happening, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The water's reaching my orchard. Chlorine levels are already high enough to cause damage. He glanced at the paper, barely. The system's working as designed, he said. That's the problem. He sighed, not annoyed, just inconvenienced. Like I was a delay in his day. Look, Daniel, I get that you're concerned. But everything we built passed inspection. It's all within code. Code doesn't protect my certification, I shot back. If this continues, I lose everything. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Then maybe you need to talk to your certification people. See if there's flexibility. I felt something snap, just a little. There isn't any flexibility, I said. That's the whole point. He shrugged again. And then he smiled. Not friendly, not hostile, just detached. I think you're making this bigger than it is. And before I could say anything else, he stepped back and closed the door. Just like that. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the reflection of myself in the glass panel beside the door, dusty boots, worn shirt, holding a piece of paper that apparently meant nothing. Then I turned around and walked back down the hill, slower this time. Because now it wasn't uncertainty anymore. Now it was a fight. By September, the damage was undeniable. Entire sections of the lower orchard were struggling. Leaves curling, branches weakening. The soil itself felt different underfoot, less alive somehow. I'd dig into it, and it wouldn't have that rich, earthy smell anymore. Just this flat, almost chemical scent that didn't belong. I called our organic certification agency as soon as I had enough data to back it up. Sent them everything. Test results, photos, documentation. The inspector came out 2 weeks later. She didn't say much while we walked the rows, just took notes, knelt down, checked the soil. At one point she picked up a handful of dirt, rubbed it between her fingers, then looked at me in a way I won't forget. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. That was it. That's when I knew. The official notice came in October. Certification suspended pending remediation and investigation. 35 years, gone in a single paragraph. I sat at my kitchen table with that letter in my hands, reading it over and over like maybe the words would change if I gave them enough time. Outside, I could see the orchard through the window, rows of trees my parents planted, trees I grew up with, now marked, officially, as compromised. I don't remember how long I sat there, but I remember what I did next. I called a lawyer. His name was Richard Cole, older guy, calm voice, the kind of person who doesn't rush you even when you're clearly spiraling a little. I laid it all out for him, everything from the plans to the test results to the certification loss. There was a pause when I finished. Then he said, "Do you have documentation linking the runoff directly to his property?" "I'm working on it," I said. "Cameras, water flow patterns, it's all there. It's just a matter of time." "Good," he replied. "Because if we're going to do this, we do it right." And that's exactly what we did. He drafted a formal demand letter, clear, direct, backed by evidence. It outlined the damages, the contamination, the financial impact, and it gave Victor a choice. Fix the issue, compensate for the losses, or prepare for litigation. We sent it, and we waited. The response came back faster than I expected. Short, clinical, written by someone who clearly billed by the hour. Their position was simple. Everything was legal. Everything was up to code. Any damages were unfortunate, but not their responsibility. I read that letter twice. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable, so clean, so completely disconnected from what was actually happening just a few hundred feet downhill. Richard didn't laugh. "We file," he said. And just like that we did. The lawsuit wasn't small. $380,000 in damages, lost income, soil restoration, recertification costs, plus whatever it would take to actually fix the source of the problem. It wasn't about revenge. At least, that's what I told myself. But somewhere deep down, beneath all the paperwork and evidence and legal language, there was something else growing. Something sharper. Because while my orchard was struggling to survive, Victor was doing just fine. Better than fine, actually. By late fall, I started hearing about it around town. He was planning some kind of showcase. An invitation-only event at his property. Architects, designers, media people, all coming to see this innovative hillside retreat. And at the center of it all, that pool, the same one leaking into my land. At first, I ignored it. Then I got curious. Then, I got an idea. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It didn't involve lawyers or courtrooms. It was simple. If he wanted people to see his house, then they were going to see everything, including what it was doing to mine. I didn't come up with the plan all at once. It kind of formed slowly, like everything else on that land. One small decision at a time, each one building on the last until suddenly, you realize you're not just reacting anymore. You're setting the stage. The first thing I did was make the damage visible. Up until then, most of it was contained to the lower rows. Easy to miss unless you knew exactly where to look. But I started working those sections more deliberately, pruning dead branches, clearing fallen fruit, turning over soil that had lost its structure. Not to fix it. Not yet, but to expose it. To let it be seen. Then I installed more cameras. Not hidden. No, that wasn't the point. I wanted them obvious. Mounted along the fence line, angled toward the slope where the runoff came through. Little red lights blinking at night, like quiet witnesses. And then the signs. I kept them simple. White boards, black lettering, nothing dramatic. Organic orchard contaminated by uphill pool drainage. Water samples and documentation in progress for legal action. Ask me what happened. I placed them where they'd be impossible to ignore, from the angle of his pool terrace, from the path guests would take during the tour, even from the house itself if you looked down long enough. When I stepped back and looked at it all, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like context. The morning of the event was clear, cool, one of those early winter days where the air feels sharp enough to wake you up completely. I started working before sunrise, same as always, moving through the orchard with my usual routine, but I stayed closer to the lower section, within view of the hillside. Around mid-morning, the cars started arriving. Not pickup trucks or dusty SUVs like we get around here. These were sleek, polished, expensive. They lined up along the newly paved driveway above, doors opening to people dressed like they belonged in a different world entirely. From where I stood, I could hear fragments of conversation drifting down, laughter, admiration, that kind of polished enthusiasm people bring to curated spaces. I kept working, didn't wave, didn't call out, just let them notice. And they did. It started with a couple standing near the edge of the terrace, looking down toward the orchard. I saw the woman point, then lean in closer. A few minutes later, more people joined them. Curiosity spreads fast in groups like that. Eventually, a small cluster made their way down the slope. Careful steps, expensive shoes navigating ground they weren't used to. One of them, a woman in a long coat, approached first. "Excuse me," she called out, polite but direct. "Are you the owner of this orchard?" I nodded, resting my hands on the handle of my shovel. "Yeah, that's me." She glanced back at the signs, then at the trees around us, the yellowed leaves, the uneven growth. "What happened here?" she asked. I didn't rush the answer. "Chlorinated water," I said. "From that pool up there." There was a pause. Not disbelief, just processing. Another man stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "You're saying runoff from the property above is affecting your soil?" I nodded again. Tested it myself. Multiple times. It's already cost me my organic certification. That one landed. You could see it in their faces. The shift from curiosity to something heavier. Concern, maybe. Or realization. Behind them, more guests were gathering now, reading the signs, looking between the orchard and the house above like they were starting to connect they hadn't even known existed. And right on cue, Victor appeared. He came down the slope with that same composed energy he always had, but this time there was something tighter underneath it. Controlled. "Daniel," he said, voice smooth but edged. "I didn't realize you'd be presenting today." I let out a small breath. Just working my land. A few people chuckled softly at that. Not mockingly, just acknowledging the tension. Victor turned to the group, offering a practiced smile. "There seems to be a bit of a property dispute. We're handling it through the proper channels." "Is it true?" the woman asked. "About the water?" Victor hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "Our system is fully compliant with all regulations," he said. "There's no evidence of wrongdoing." I tilted my head slightly. "The evidence is right there," I said, gesturing to the soil, the trees, the cameras. "And it's all documented." That's when one of the guests, a man who had been quiet up until now, spoke up. "I'm an architect," he said. "Specialize in hillside builds." Victor stiffened. The man glanced up toward the pool, then back down at the slope, his expression shifting into something more analytical. "If your overflow is directed straight downgrade without proper containment or filtration," he said slowly, "that's not just an oversight. That's a serious design flaw." The silence that followed was different, heavier. Victor's smile didn't return this time. "Well," he said, clearing his throat slightly, "I think we've spent enough time down here. Let's head back up and continue the tour." But the energy had already shifted. People lingered. They asked more questions about the orchard, about the certification process, about the timeline. Some of them took photos. Not of the house, of the damage. By the time the event wrapped up, it didn't feel like a showcase anymore. It felt like something had unraveled. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Then the article came out. A small architecture blog at first. Nothing major, but the headline was sharp enough to cut through the noise. "When design ignores downhill consequences." It didn't name Victor directly, but the details were unmistakable. Then another piece followed. And another. One of them featured photos from that day, the signs, the orchard, even a shot of the water runoff captured by one of my cameras. Suddenly, it wasn't just a private dispute anymore. It was a conversation. By the time we reached mediation in January, everything had changed. Victor wasn't as composed. His legal team wasn't as confident. And the evidence? Well, it had only gotten stronger. Video footage showing the water flow. Independent lab results confirming contamination levels. Witness statements from people who had been at that event. All of it lined up. Clean. Undeniable. The mediation itself didn't take long. No dramatic speeches. No courtroom theatrics. Just numbers. Facts. Consequences. In the end, he settled. $380,000 in damages. Full responsibility for redesigning the drainage system, this time with proper containment, filtration, and redirection away from my land. On paper, it was a win. And yeah, in a lot of ways it was. But here's the thing people don't really talk about. Money doesn't restore soil overnight. It doesn't bring trees back to life. It doesn't rewind time. Even now, parts of the orchard are still recovering. Some rows had to be completely replanted. The certification process? Starting over from scratch. 3 more years. Sometimes I walk those rows in the early morning, when everything's quiet, and I think about how close I came to losing all of it. Not because of a storm, not because of disease, but because someone decided a better view was worth the risk. And I wonder, if I hadn't put up those signs, if those guests hadn't asked questions, if that one architect hadn't spoken up, would anything have changed? Or would the water just keep flowing downhill, quietly, until there was nothing left to fight for? I don't know. But I do know this. Sometimes the only way to be heard is to make sure people can't look away. So what do you think? Was I right to handle it the way I did, putting it all out there, letting the public see what was happening? Or should I have kept it strictly legal, avoided the spotlight, trusted the system to sort it out? I'm curious where you land on that. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because out here, between the land and the law, the line between right and wrong isn't always as clear as people think.